Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Can't believe the story I saw already of what's going on in Russia. Bread lines in Russia are back. Putin is making Russia the Soviet Union again. It's not even making it great again, making it the Soviet Union again. And look, reality, coming to a place like Texas or Florida near you, Putin and company, authoritarian rule, all of the things that they love about their dear strongman. Wow. Who would have thought in such a short period of time? Freedom, democracy, truth, justice, the American way, all under assault because, we've got, angry white guys who seem to think that their way is the only way. Very strange times. And I'll tell you, as I'm reading the headlines and I'm reading the stories about the bread lines and the rationing and that's going on in Russia right now, my mind is spinning in a whole bunch of places going, I can't imagine that the young people there today are going to tolerate that kind of struggle, that kind of sacrifice as the older generation did. Because the older generation was raised with the idea that, common struggle, common good, the idea that they're all in this together, that, that's just how it was. Younger generation, not so much. They've given up some freedoms. They've given up some things for the idea that, there's going to be the shelves filled, that they're not going to have to beg and plead and save a lifetime to get a pair of jeans. I guess it's that cycle of history kind of repeating itself. But I saw this and my mind went to this place of how long do the Russian people tolerate this? As the globe is putting the squeeze on Putin. And look, Putin's going to say, look, it's the evil American Satan that's doing this. When the reality is there is one guy responsible for this. When Vlad looks in the mirror, he's seeing the guy responsible. And I hope that the Russian people do see this, that what is happening to them right now is the fault of one guy, and it's the guy that they've unfortunately got in their Kremlin, in their leadership role. Now, if you look at the news, now understand, the Russian people don't see the same news we see. Now, we've got that F channel. We've got that. We've got all of the propaganda, right-wing spin machines here as well. But at least we get to see a lot of different things. We get to see a lot of stuff. Now, again, we've got our right-wing propagandists. We've got our Tuckers, and we've got those folks. But at least we're seeing stuff that's coming out of there. The people in Russia aren't seeing the bombed hospital. And the Kremlin defending bombing the hospital by saying, well, there were extremists in there. It was a terrorist base. No, it was a hospital. It was a hospital where there were children. And you go, what kind of an evil, maniacal, horrible human being bombs a freaking hospital? You go, well, we know. This is what they do. This is the kind of misery and the suffering that they're going to cause. And look, that was done on purpose. So there's not much to go back to. This is about inflicting maximum pain, suffering, and damage long term. Look, I think Putin knows eventually going to get his pound of flesh, going to get some of his demands, going to get what he wants. The question is how much is going to be left over when it's over? And will he be left over? It's strange. Now, I think Joe Biden has done a fantastic job to this point. In fact, I think we as a country so far, great job. The fact that it's been, come out now that, our intelligence is saying, Russia's probably going to use chemical weapons, especially as they're kind of laying the ground saying, there could be bioweapons in there that, there could be the U.S. and Ukraine were doing some bio stuff. That could be something that they were doing maybe, I don't know, with birds. They're spinning this tale. They want to spin this in a way that maybe this is where coronavirus came from. Maybe this will be the justification. No, people. It wasn't China where the virus came from. It was actually Ukraine. This is what they want to do. And look, if you have total control, if you have absolute dictatorial control over everything that people see, hear, and read, you can spin this stuff any way you want. And I think that's what they were trying to do. And I think that's why the administration here has put it out that, they may try it. Now, I find it interesting that even the Russian state media, even Russian state TV is pleading with Putin, stop. This is bad. People are suffering. People are struggling. I mean, stop and think about where we are. There are bread lines in Russia again. There's talk of a major superpower using chemical weapons on a neighbor. Let that sink in for a minute. Let Now, there was some good news that did come out today. China, evidently, according to Russian officials, has refused to sell them aircraft parts. That, I guess, is a good thing because it does mean then that China's not all in. Because I got to think China knows this is bad for business. Because China only cares about how much they can rip us off, how much they can fleece us for. How much, because there's still a lot here for them to grab. I'm still not sure what the end game for Russia is. Is it all about squeezing Europe and getting as much as they can for the gas? Is it about that? Is it about getting more natural resources out of Ukraine? What is it? Nobody seems to really know yet. Now the justifications, and I've been getting a lot of this. Been getting a lot of this from especially the left, the anti-war left, of which, look, I'm an anti-war guy like anybody else. I am against the idea of starting a war. I'm against the idea of getting into a war if we don't have to. But here's the thing. It's like any fight. When someone starts a fight, especially when you've got one guy as rich and as powerful as someone like Vladimir Putin, who is taking poor kids from Russia, poor and working class kids from that country and sending them over to kill poor and working class kids in another country, you have to eventually stand up to the bully. A pacifist only can take so much of a beating. So at some point, the international community has to do something. And I think so far what's happening is the right thing, the right direction. But I'm looking at this moment going, there's one guy responsible for this. Stop with all of the, he's got a point. I had someone I call a friend send me, well, you can't argue with his rationale. What if Canada did want to put Chinese nuclear weapons on our border? They wouldn't. Why even throw that out there? That would not happen. And they don't have the same history that you have in that part of the world. It would never happen. Stop it. It's not about us. Take us out of the equation. This isn't about the U.S. This is about Ukraine and their right of self-determination. It is about those countries in that part of the world being able to decide what they want to do with their country. It's about the Ukrainian people deciding what kind of a country do they want to have. It is about their freedom and their democracy and their way. Now, you go, well, they're corrupt. Yes, and they're trying. All of these justifications are not reasons to bomb a freaking hospital. And they are not justifications for what's going on. Does Putin have arguments? Sure, everyone's got an argument. But you do not do this by killing people. What Putin has done masterfully is he's changed the topic. It's no longer about his actions. It's about everyone else's. This is classic abuser mentality. It's no longer about the things that he's done and he is doing. Oh, well, if only they wouldn't have done this, then, well, I certainly wouldn't have had to. And how many times have we heard that story? Well, if she wouldn't have burnt dinner, she wouldn't have gotten it. Or if, the kids wouldn't have been so loud, well, classic abuser mentality. And do we tolerate that? Should that be tolerated? Oh, he didn't mean it. Just, if you just appeased him a little bit more. Because here's the thing, and I think we're finding out more and more of this. You can't appease him. This wasn't about all of the nonsense. This is about reconstituting the old Soviet bloc. This was about this was about legacy. This was about, the purity. This was about that, at least this is how I see it. This was about recreating the vision of the past. And later on in the program, we're going to talk with a professor of Russian history, and maybe he'll agree or disagree. But that's my view on it as a kid who grew up during the Cold War era, as someone who grew up, looking at the Soviet Union with a jaundiced eye, looking at them fearfully. And I'll tell you this, quite frankly, watching them get stuck in the mud and bumble over each other like the Keystone Cops, trying to find where the battlefront is, if this is the second most powerful military in the world, or they're spending a lot of money for no reason, because they are bumbling all over each other. But I got a lot to get to, a lot to talk about. Want to get your thoughts, questions, comments? 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Got to take a quick break right here. Remember, if you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Every week we put out a special podcast, special interviews that you'll want to make sure you get. So subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast, from iTunes to iHeart, Podbean to Stitcher, all those places everywhere in between. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So while all this is going on in Ukraine, obviously all we keep hearing about is, oh my God, it's inflation. And the thing that gets me is all we keep talking about is inflation. Every stop along the supply chain, it's inflation. When the reality is it's corporate greed. And maybe I would rather, instead of saying inflation, inflation's going up, how about we say corporate greed's going up? Because, we're not hearing corporations going, oh my gosh, profits are down. Oh goodness. Prices are up, but you know what? Profits are down. This is the part that gets me. You go, but profits are up, right? And prices went up, right? So explain, where the inflation from other sources is. It sounds like you raised prices to make more money. Yeah, that's what happened. And you go, but the consumer, this is the consumer, right? Because we're told it's the free market. Free market. You have the right to not buy it. If it's too much, you have the right to abstain, right? If gas gets to $6 a gallon, you have the right to not use it, right? Well, no. See, this is where that whole free market, the market's always right, it always breaks down. Because here's the thing. Gas should not be as high as it is. You look at ExxonMobil, you look at all of them, Shell, BP, all of them. They made $174 billion in profit last year? In a year where, we didn't use as much as we have in past years? Profits went up. Didn't use as much, profits went up. They're going to do probably better this year. And they're definitely going to do better. Because prices are up. They go, it's not our fault, prices went up. You go, hold on. Explain to me how it's not. Now, I get it. It's a world commodity, the shortages, I get it. I also get the fact that because of the pandemic, the production hasn't been ramped back up yet. I also get the fact that we don't have as much in storage tanks that are being used. I get all of those arguments, but when you look at the fact that speculation is a huge part of the cost of oil, that corporate America isn't lining their pockets. Gas should be $1.50 cheaper if you take out all of the criminal elements that are part of this. You go, criminal elements, the free market makes things much more efficient. Because I said something, half in jest the other day. I said, it's about time we nationalize the oil industry. It's about time we finally take back the energy sector and nationalize it and make it something that is now a public utility, a part of the commons. And that we run it, can't do it much worse than the private sector does. And the guy goes, you show me a country that does it, efficiently. I go, well, show me a country that does it efficiently. Okay, yeah, they don't do it efficiently, but they also don't charge everybody a gazillion dollars. So find me a middle ground where we're gonna actually, I don't know, not get raked over the coals. Because who gets hurt by this? The poor and the working class. Does it matter to the guy making, $100,000 a year? Not really. It's an extra couple of bucks a week that they're going to pay. Does it matter to that person who's making, just above minimum wage, who has to drive 40 miles to get to work? Yeah, this is life-changing for them. And this is where it's incumbent on me to say that I think Joe Biden has made a slight mistake here. When they did the banning on the imports, I think he should have come out and said, look, this is a matter of national emergency. The globe is in a moment of solidarity. What we need to do right now is we need to, as a matter of course, we're going to cut all gas taxes that are going on everything. We're going to cut those all out. And to pay for the revenue lost from gas taxes, we're going to raise a special tax on corporate profits to meet those gas taxes. So all those people who are robbing us blind at the pump, we're going to get a special gas tax to cover the fuel taxes that aren't being paid by the consumer to ensure that prices come down and people can get to work. We're also going to put a bunch of oil into the market from the strategic reserve to make sure that there's enough supply in the system to make sure that the prices don't go crazy like they've been doing. I think they should have done that. Because what's going to happen, and Republicans are playing this game, they understand it. Yeah, they're gonna vote for it. They're gonna say, yeah, we support it, but they're also gonna out of the other side of their mouth go, it's because Joe Biden didn't do anything. Biden's the fault because the gas prices are high. It's Biden inflation. This is what's happening, right? Because they've got nothing else, and there's nothing better for a Republican than the most simplistic message possible. And the most simplistic message for a conservative, a Republican voter right now, is everything is Joe Biden's fault. Even though that's not reality, it's just easy. It doesn't take much thinking. It doesn't take much analysis. It's just simple. We can put a sticker out with a finger of Joe Biden pointing so they can put it on gas pumps and they can do their little ritualistic stuff and like chanting, "Let's go, Brandon." They can get into their trucker convoy and they can drive around D.C. and waste $6 a gallon on diesel and honk their horns and not care about paying that, but complain that it's $6 a gallon, which is twisted and bizarre. But we're in this moment where the messaging matters. And for me, the messaging out of this is, you know who you blame? You blame corporate America. Because they're the ones who, quite frankly, they're the ones who are raising prices. They're the ones who have us undersupplied. They're the ones who have done just-in-time inventory. They're the ones who, during the pandemic, ramped down production. They're the ones who here in Pennsylvania were capping wells. They're the ones who were shutting down things. And look, they had to, because during the pandemic, when no one was driving, they couldn't keep pulling stuff out of the ground because they had nowhere to store it. And they did the right thing. They shut down. You can't just ramp production up by flipping a switch or snapping your fingers. This takes time. Republicans, thoughtful Republicans understand. But the chaos merchants, the outrage candy folks, they just want simplistic nonsense to feed to the minions, to keep them outraged and angry and pointing, "Let's go, Brandon," and pointing their finger at Joe Biden. Because it's simple and it keeps people angry. They can blame somebody. When the reality is the person to blame, big part of it, the former guy and the policies that Republicans have been pushing. Because here's the thing. You want to be angry at somebody? Be angry at Ronald Reagan for pulling the solar panels off the White House back in 1981 when he became president. Blame every Republican administration since who stopped every piece of legislation that moved us in a more green, more alternative energy direction. Blame every politician who stopped us from moving towards green and clean energy policy. Because we should be there by now. We should have the technology available. We should have already done it. It should have been built. And for those people who can't get to work because gas prices are through the roof, be angry that we didn't build during the Obama years all of those trains and all of that public transit that I was screaming that I wanted and that all of us wanted. Be angry that our policymakers did not listen to working people. Be angry that Republicans never listen to working people. And the reason? They hate working people. We are the pawns in their game. We are the workers who make them their profit. We are the people who clean up their mess. It's that simple. And the sooner we wake up to that reality, and this is crystal clear to me, the sooner we wake up to that reality, the better off we're going to be. And maybe we can start getting some of those policies that are going to help working families get ahead. Just my thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you're just joining us, grab the podcast. Never miss a minute. Also, special episodes of the podcast, only podcast forms. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1925. That was the day the first civil lawsuit for damages was filed on behalf of the Radium Girls. During the 1910s and 20s, radium was all the rage. It was considered a medical cure-all for everything from blindness to asthma. The U.S. Radium Corporation employed hundreds of young women in New Jersey and Illinois to paint radium onto watch dials and military instruments. Women workers were instructed to shape the paintbrushes to a fine point with their lips in order to paint the numbers onto the watch faces. They soon fell ill. Many complained of losing scores of teeth and shattered and rotting jaws. The death toll began to rise. U.S. Radium and other related companies initially tried to smear the women as suffering from syphilis. Catherine Wiley of the New Jersey Consumers League began investigating the use of radium by dial painters. She was also concerned about how emissions affected the community surrounding the plant. Wiley enlisted the help of Alice Hamilton, mother of industrial medicine and occupational toxicology. The chief medical examiner of Essex County determined the women suffered from radium exposure. They were exhaling radon gas. The findings were earth-shattering for the industry. Case proceedings were highly publicized in the press. Extremely frail and sick young women appeared in court, barely able to walk or testify. The company agreed to settle the case. $10,000 for each woman, a $400 a year pension, and medical care. Women at the Ottawa plant suffered for years before finally learning the truth about their job-related illnesses. The case impacted fields related to occupational safety and health. It also fundamentally broadened scientific understanding of radioactive elements. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Last July, several GOP senators combined their 5-watt intellects to charge that inflation was rising because of, quote, insane tax and spending spree of President Biden and the Democrats. Never mind that the insane spending is for such sensible, productive, and enormously popular national needs as child care and jobless benefits. Mitch McConnell's rabidly partisan flock saw the chance to politicize the public's legitimate worries about rising prices. You poor consumers are made to pay more for basics, they squawked, because of Socialist Joe's investment in grassroots people. Follow the ricocheting pinball of the GOP's logic. 1, they say that helping hard-hit families induces them to refuse to go to work. 2, this creates blockages in the global supply chain. 3, this causes shortages of everything. 4, this forces corporate bosses to raise all prices, which 5, slams the middle class and poor, so 6, lazy workers cause inflation. Whoa! Rube Goldberg couldn't have dreamed up a more fantastical diagram to deflect attention from what's really happening. Namely, that instead of an inflation problem, we have a corporate greed problem. Of course, the greedmeisters insist that their pursuit of excess corporate profits has not driven any price surges. In our economy of free market competition, they snap, prices are established by the law of supply and demand. It's the magic of the marketplace, they explain. But magicians don't do magic, they perform illusions. And the illusion of free market competition implodes when it hits the reality that our economy doesn't remotely resemble a competitive marketplace. This is Jim Hightower saying, for some 40 years, corporate-directed government policies have been transforming America into a monopoly nation, letting the few gouge the many. That's where inflation comes from.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, you look at all these reports coming out of Ukraine, the possibility of a chemical attack. You listen to all of these stories. It's, it's horrible. But, I saw this funny. My next guest tweeted something I thought was breaking news. It was kind of funny. Evidently, according to her sources, there's a chemical attack being planned by the United States that is going to infect every Russian and turn them into a drag queen. I guess that's coming. That's a joke. It's not going to happen. There isn't. The conservatives, they don't have that chemical yet. I'm sure that you're going to run back and draw up legislation to ensure that there is no chemical to turn people into drag queens. I know it's coming. I know there will be a think tank looking into this. Or maybe there is a drug. Maybe there is. And here to share some thoughts on the possibility of a drag queen chemical, I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. Sarah's a reporter over at RawStory, RawStory.com, the website if you want to check out her work. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello. Wouldn't it be cool if I've always thought that there should be like a special battalion in the Army of like just a whole group of drag queens, because nobody would have ever expected, right? It would be the elements of surprise. You would have these, obviously a drag queen can hide their thing anywhere. Like the places the dude put the thing is impressive. So if they can hide that, clearly they can stick a gun in all sorts of different, pockets and fluffy things. So I think that would be a brilliant way to have an element of surprise, particularly in homophobic Russia.
It would be fabulous.
Or Florida.
It would be fabulous. You ever see?
It would be fabulous.
Eddie Izzard when he did his License to Kill bit. When he's an executive transvestite, and he had talked about that, the executive transvestite brigade, jumping out of planes and wearing high heels and all that.
I think it's brilliant. It's the most incredible idea because, I think the element of surprise would unfold. And probably because Putin is so homophobic, he might actually just faint. You get the vapors.
There you go. Let's move on. Evidently, the former guy had an emergency plane landing, and someone had told me, had wondered why they didn't throw him out of the plane to lighten the load a little bit so that the plane didn't crash, which is kind of mean.
A little bit mean. What was interesting, I thought, is that Trump has his own plane. This was not that plane. He called it Trump Force One, has sat on the runway in New York for 6 years and not been used because for a while, obviously, he was the president and they used Air Force One for security purposes. But after being president, if you left your plane sitting there forever and you're not actually using it and repairing it regularly, it kind of is like a sports car. It just turns into a pile of rust. So he hasn't been able to fly his actual plane. He's been borrowing planes from rich Republican donors. And that's what happened to him leaving New Orleans this past weekend. And so they had to scramble and find another rich person and loan him a plane.
But I thought he was worth $1 gazillion. I thought he was the richest guy ever. I thought he was. I understand that, again, he does a great job of bilking his minions. I guess there's a fundraising effort to help him, buy a new Trump Force One. Is that happening?
Well, what's really interesting is he basically said last year that he was going to repair his plane. It'll be operational, be up and running soon. So the fact that he wasn't even using this plane and then sent out an email to all of his supporters and he's like, oh my God, let me tell you about the update on Trump Force One. Send me your money. And that was sort of shocking because this is a $100 million plane that he bought, forever ago, I think in the mid 2000s. And so I'm just surprised that I don't think he's actually going to spend money on this. I think he's going to pocket the cash and then, do a couple of updates. Yeah. From what I understand, I talked to somebody who actually used to work for Donald Trump, who told me that he has always done the bare minimum of what the FAA requires to keep it running, and that they had a huge emergency over the Indian Ocean. This was years and years ago, where the plane lost one of its engines, and the pilot actually was able to fly it on just one engine to get them off of, the area to land in Dubai. So.
Yeah, see, I imagine he may raise a bunch of money. He may fleece the flock. And what's amazing to me, and this is where I struggle, and this is where I struggle on a bunch of fronts. I remember when Creflo Dollar, the televangelist, was saying, "Hey, send me money so I can buy a $60 million jet," and people were like, "Yeah, okay, we're going to send you money." This is where I struggle with poor people, with working people, sending them $5, going, "Here, okay, yeah, you rich guy need more." I'm looking at all of these people giving their last couple of bucks to a rich blankety blank like this, only to find out that he probably pocketed, run the plane over to Earl Scheib for a cheap paint job and go, "Look at my new plane." I mean,
yeah,
that's what I think of him. That's the kind of con man that I think he is.
I think you're absolutely right. What is weird to me is in the description of the plane, it talks about there being 14 karat gold seatbelt buckles. And I'm like, I can't imagine Trump actually having 14 karat gold. I feel like he would just gold plate that and then take the buckles and melt it down and try and sell it for the cash.
Exactly.
That just he is more of a showman than an actual wealthy rich person.
Yep.
He just wants it to look fancy. He doesn't actually want it to be fancy.
It's all about
which is
the
why
presentation.
it's a crappy plane.
Yeah, he's the kind of guy who you have the most beautiful cake, but it tastes like garbage. That's what I get from him. And for those who don't get the Earl Scheib reference, Earl Scheib was an automobile paint shop years ago, where for $39.95 he'll paint any car, any color. And if he didn't tape anything, he would basically just drive. It was a drive-through kind of paint job. The bumpers, the windows. It's like me painting the house, which is why my wife won't let me near a paintbrush. Paint the light bulbs, the light switches, everything. So if you didn't get that reference, you're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter for RawStory, rawstory.com, the website. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Always there for you. Never miss a moment. If you got a thought, question, comment, something you want to ask Sarah, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Now, Ted Cruz, most punchable man in America, I still believe. Evidently, he's back getting a little attention. Took a little ride around D.C. with the trucker convoy, and I got to tell you, I think he found where he should be. I think he found his niche. I think that's a job. I think that's for him. I think he belongs there.
I think maybe for a while, but once those folks really get to know him, they'll probably shove him out too. Because that's the problem, right? The Texas people don't really like Ted Cruz because they've got to know him. And so there was just a lot of folks having fun today. It was a nice, normal Thursday afternoon in the middle of a war where we could all just come together and talk about how much we all hate Ted Cruz and what a fool he is. And I mean, the video of it, like some dude sitting behind him, probably an intern that was like holding his camera and his camera phone, and Ted Cruz was just like giving everybody a thumbs up and waving like he was in a parade, like he was Miss
Congeniality.
Pump Queen. Yeah, in a car following behind everybody else, doing the princess wave. So, and basically the whole route that they've been taking, the thought was that they were supposed to add a different lane every day, like a different loop around the Beltway every day. That not only hasn't happened yesterday because it rained. I guess the rain scared them off and they didn't go at all.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, what is rain like something magical that can eat Republicans, or like how does that work? Is this like a Wicked Witch of the West sort of situation? I don't understand.
Yeah, well, we had a guest on yesterday who's a reporter over at the Daily Beast, and he's been following this whole thing. What you find out is most of the quote-unquote truckers are actually people who own trucking companies. They're not real truck drivers. So inclement weather is a little...
They can't drive them.
Yeah, you're a little worried about the inclement weather, a little worried about running into something. And hey, good on them for knowing their limitations.
Yeah, I'm surprised they admit that.
No, they didn't admit it. They were just afraid of rain. But, once you find out who these people are, they're not real truck drivers. Real truck drivers, they're out there busting their hump. They're out there, the wheels aren't turning. They're not making money. There aren't truck drivers who can just be driving around in circles, waving at people, carting Ted Cruz's behind around at $5-6 a gallon. That ain't happening. If that trailer ain't full and those wheels aren't turning, getting to a destination, their kids don't eat. So what we're seeing is a display of people who think that they're going to make some money on the other end. And these are people who generally own these companies who are looking to make a name for themselves, looking for attention. Like the guy, Bob Bolus up in Scranton, who owns Bolus Trucking, who, your basic sperm lottery winner, whose grandparents started it back during the Depression, and it was handed down to him through the generations, who led the one man convoy who couldn't find DC. Yeah, that's that guy.
This is what's interesting to me is a lot of the folks that are here, like they were given, they had this organization that was raising money for them, and I want to say like $1.6 million, over 1.6 is how much money they have. And now folks are starting to ask, like, what happened to all the money?
Yeah.
Because they, I mean, obviously you've got a lot of different people with cars. Are they paying for their own gas? Is it coming out of the 1.6? Are they using it to help pay for the speedway where they're parked or buy people's pizza? Like, where is all of that money going for these folks that are basically just occupying a speedway in Hagerstown, Maryland.
Yeah, well, they've got an executive director, and didn't the one woman, wasn't she convicted or accused of fraud, and all kinds of scheming. So I'm going to assume a lot of it's going to be chewed up in the latest fraud scheme to ensure that you got to feed the house first, right?
Yeah, she's got a handling fee that she's going to charge, and it's at least 60%.
Right off the top. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show, where Sarah Burris is a reporter at RawStory. She's got some incredible reports that you absolutely need to take a look at. I'm looking at the Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I got to get your thoughts on the fact
Why?
that I got to get your thoughts on the fact that she's worked an entire year and evidently hasn't made a dime.
Well, bless her heart. To be fair, I think that that's completely normal whenever you're not on any committees, you're not actually doing anything important, and you're breaking the rules all the time with the whole mask thing, then maybe you just shouldn't get any cash. I like this idea of her being in Congress and not actually getting paid to be in Congress, because then, maybe she'll be quieter or get bored and just walk away. Maybe she'll go garden or start a golf course. I don't know, but maybe
there you go.
We can get rid of her.
All right, so let's get to some actual stuff that's going on. Michael Flynn testified today, or not. Pled the fifth. So is this now? Are we into gangster territory? Because according to the former guy, only mob guys plead the fifth.
That's what I'm wondering. Like, this seems exactly like what Trump said. When you plead the fifth, only the mobsters are pleading the fifth. Flynn said today, as part of the statement that his lawyer put out, that they have a lawsuit pending, and so it's not fair for the committee to have sat him down for a deposition. And the lawsuit that he has is that forcing him to answer questions would be a violation of constitutional rights because of the Fifth Amendment. And that's just bad lawyering. Like, that's one of the things that I talked about on Twitter. I'm not a lawyer, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express once. And what I have learned in the shower is you actually can't, you can't preeminently assume that every question you will plead the fifth to, because there will be questions that will not incriminate you.
Yeah, like what's your name?
See? Yeah, like, what is your name? How old are you? Where do you live? What did you witness another person doing? What did you experience or overhear, but maybe you weren't directly a part of? And I think the committee is going to be smart enough to be able to ask those questions so that there really is no Fifth Amendment that he can try to plead. If it was me, that's how I would ask the questions. I think he's going to end up in court, and the judge is going to laugh at him.
Yeah. Well, at some point, I want these people going to jail because they're all criminals. They all belong behind bars. And look, the more we're hearing coming out from the Trumpkins that are finally coming forward because they're coming out with their books and trying to make money, the more all of the things we've been talking about were actually spot on, dead accurate. All of the leaks that came out during the former guy's term were right on. And now we know factually what was happening. Now we need to be locking these people up. I got to take a quick break right here. I need you to stick around through the other side because I want to get to some of the other stuff that happened today. The fact that 17 people voted against the Russian oil import ban, which is just mind blowing to me. I'm going to take a quick break right here. Your thoughts on the other side, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You're just joining us. Make sure you grab the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. We're here with Sarah Burris, reporter over at RawStory, rawstory.com. That website, right back. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1968. That was the day that farm labor activist Cesar Chavez broke a 25-day fast. He fasted as a sign of commitment to nonviolence during the struggle for farm workers in Delano, California, to gain fair wages and safe working conditions. During the fast, he only drank water. He broke the fast with a ceremonial mass in Delano. Presidential candidate Robert Kennedy was in attendance. At the Mass, Chavez was too weak to give a speech, so he gave his written words to Reverend James Drake to share with those in attendance. He wrote, "We are gathered here today not so much to observe the end of the fast, but because we are a family bound together in common struggle for justice. We are a union family celebrating our unity and the nonviolent nature of our movement. The fast has had different meanings for different people. Some of you may still wonder about its meaning and importance. It was not intended as a pressure against any growers. For that reason, we have suspended negotiations and arbitration proceedings and relaxed the militant picketing and boycotting of the strike during this period. I undertook the fast because my heart was filled with grief and pain for the suffering of the farm workers. The fast was first for me and then for all of us in this union. It was a fast for nonviolence and a call for sacrifice." Chavez engaged in 2 more long fasts during his life as an activist. He fasted in 1972 for 24 days. And in 1988, at the age of 61, he fasted for 36 days to highlight the harmful effects of pesticides on farm workers and their children. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So 414 to a whopping 17. 414 to 17, that means 17 people voted against it. 15 Republicans, 2 Democrats. Ilhan Omar, Cori Bush were the 2 Democrats. And look, I got to tell you, I don't know how you vote against this. I know they had their rationales wrong. I'm just going right there. But not surprised on the Republicans who were there. Of course, you had Cawthorn, you had Boebert. Of course, you had Green, Gozer, Gates. You had all of the regular crew. Not surprising whatsoever. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on that. Sarah Burris, RawStory reporter, fabulous. Love her and the work she does. Make sure you check that out, Sarah. Thanks for sticking around.
Hey, my pleasure.
So what do you think of this? I mean, you got 17 people. I mean, if there is one thing that should pull all of us together, it's what's going on in Ukraine right now. Because as I've been saying, this is a clear, in my view, a very clear, cut and dry case of one guy, one giant a-hole, one massive wealthy rich guy sending poor and working class kids from Russia into Ukraine to kill poor working class people there. There's one person responsible. There's no justification whatsoever. I don't care. It's one guy.
And you can tell how wrong it is because he's having to work with China to manufacture so much propaganda that will justify all of his actions. And basically what happened this week is that so many Republicans have just decided that either they are on the side of Russia because there are a couple of them who have made statements where they've completely supported Russia. Matt Cawthorn, who had his license revoked again, I guess. So he's already having a bad week. Maybe that's it. Maybe he just is grumpy. But the rest of them, like there was the saddest thing that I heard this week is that there's a whole movement of people who are really trying to hold up all of the Ukrainian aid because they want to tie the aid to the border. And so every amount of aid that is sent to Ukraine has to also be put somehow at the border. And so this has become this huge argument in Congress between, the normal Republicans, of which there are 5, and all of these Freedom Caucus nutters. And even Mitch McConnell is just like, for the love of God, will you pass this bill so we can move it?
Yeah.
Because it's in a CR. So this is funding for Ukraine as well as for the entirety of the government.
Yeah, everything.
So we're going to shut down the government because, these idiots not only don't, they not only want to buy a bunch of oil from Russia, they also don't want to send aid to Ukraine. And they still think that if they throw enough money at the border that somehow it will stop people from coming, which is absurd. Clearly, we have shown that doesn't work.
It's completely ridiculous, but this is where we are. And what's interesting is these are people who want to use Ukraine and what's going on there to advance their agenda. Mm-hmm. And I would go, it's even worse than that, because I think these are people who really don't care about what's going on there. In fact, I think a lot of them are sympathizers of Putin and want to push that kind of agenda here. I mean, look what's going on in Texas. Look what's going on in Florida. These are supposed to be the party of smaller, less intrusive government. These are supposed to be the people, get government out of our lives, but yet massively intrusive and oppressive bills that they're ramming through.
And there was a fantastic report about all of the white supremacist inclinations, I suppose, that Paul Gosar has, that CNN did last weekend. And Gosar is one of the ones who is trying to oppose the aid to Ukraine and trying to tie this whole thing to the border. So it just makes me think, like, is he buying into this Russian propaganda that, we're protecting Ukraine, but the reality is they're really trying to impose their own anti-Semitic, crazy, paranoid Putin government on top of Ukraine. And that's basically, Matt Cawthorn has projected the same sort of propaganda that we're getting out of Russia, where he claims, we're going in there to save the Jews, and you're just like, really, dude? Like, you have no clue.
Do you remember when the religious folk were running around saying we need to get the Russian Jews back to Jerusalem? You remember when they were all they're so, the religious right in this country is so out of their minds, and this is all playing out in this part of the world, and in our policy. I mean, I guess that's the best I could come up with.
Yeah, and what's crazy is in the United States, I feel like they don't really know what to think anymore, because they've leveraged so much of their political capital and their public capital to the Republican Party and to Donald Trump that they really can't be taken seriously anymore. So anyone with any sort of, intellectual clout is not going to look at them as if they're legitimate at all. And so this idea that, they would want to do some kind of humanitarian work, everybody's going to be like, oh, yeah, sure. We've heard that one before.
Yeah.
Nice plane out back.
Yeah. I mean, they don't have a soul. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, is for all of the talk of religiosity, all of the talk of values, there's nothing. In fact, how many mega churches do you see, offering to send their planes of humanitarian aid over? How many of the Pat Robertson and the 700 Club flights are going over there? I don't see any of that happening.
Yeah, but by God, the second the bomb started flying, Chef Jose Andreas and the World Kitchen showed up on the border of Poland and Ukraine and was serving everybody there a hot meal and hot tea.
Yeah, and good on them, man.
Those are the people we need to be supporting right now.
Absolutely. Sarah, I appreciate the time. Always great stuff. Great talking with you. Keep up the great work, and I hope you'll come back and talk with us again real soon.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
You as well, our good friend Sarah Burris. Seriously, check out the work she does at rawstory.com. Just a small taste here of what she does. Make sure you check that out. We'll get links out on social media, how you can take a look at that. If you're just tuning in, make sure you grab the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Whether on iTunes or iHeart, Podbean, Stitcher, anywhere in between, you can find The Rick Smith Show there for your listening pleasure. Subscribe, share, all of that. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Today, I'm announcing the United States is targeting the main artery of Russia's economy.
Biden bans Russian fossil fuel imports.
It's hard, bloody hard, but it's possible.
Europe rapidly overhauls its energy security strategy. Plus, Global carbon emissions reach new all-time high.
From bad to worse, all of those stories straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas and energy.
Take that, Vlad. America doesn't need your klepto crude. America is perfectly happy to stay home and frack ourselves blind.
Ain't it the truth? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, the beat that you have been on for 13 years now appears to be right at the very center of geopolitics and perhaps even World War III.
Unfortunately, it may be. President Biden's announcement this week to immediately ban imports of Russian fossil fuels in order to stop indirectly funding Russia's war on Ukraine could also mark an inflection point in history. Biden warned that the ban will likely increase prices on American consumers, and he dismissed the U.S. oil industry's opportunistic push to weaken environmental regulations as a false choice.
Nice try, Big Oil.
He said the only long-term solution is for the U.S. to double down on mobilizing clean energy to accelerate the shift away from polluting fossil fuels as a matter of energy security and to end, once and for all, the power of dictators to use energy as an economic weapon anywhere.
Yep.
Transforming our economy to run on electric vehicles powered by clean energy, with tax credits to help American families winterize their homes and use less energy. That will help. That'll mean tyrants like Putin won't be able to use fossil fuels as weapons against other nations. And it will make America a world leader, manufacturing and exporting clean energy technologies of the future to countries all around the world. This is the goal we should be racing toward.
He's right.
A new Wall Street Journal poll finds nearly 80% of Americans of all political stripes support banning Russian fossil fuel imports, even if it raises gas prices further.
Wow, someone ought to tell Fox News.
But Biden also warned oil companies against using the war in Ukraine as cover to raise prices to maximize their profits.
Good luck.
Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren on MSNBC on Wednesday said she is introducing a windfall profits tax to block the industry from war profiteering.
I'm co-sponsoring with Senator Whitehouse and others a bill on windfall profits tax. Look, we get it, supply and demand, that prices go up, but profit margins should not go up. That's just oil companies gouging.
How unlike them?
After Biden announced the ban, the UK also moved to phase out Russian fossil fuel imports by the end of this year in order to give businesses time to replace Russian imports. And the European Union, which is heavily dependent on Russian oil and gas, unveiled new plans this week to overhaul its own energy security strategy. On top of a rapid brake that would cut imports of Russian gas by 2/3 by the end of this year, the EU has also unveiled a long-term strategy to speed up their planned transition away from fossil fuels, ending all dependence on all fossil fuels, quote, well before 2030.
And not a moment too soon.
Their strategy includes fast-tracking permitting for wind, solar, and renewable hydrogen projects, revisiting decisions to phase out nuclear energy, and doubling the rate of conversions from gas-fired boilers to electric heat pumps to permanently cut natural gas demand. Ironically, it took just 13 days after Russia's invasion to push Europe to accelerate its clean energy transition.
After you have been spending 13 years trying to get them to do so.
The Washington Post reports that White House aides are in early discussions over a Heat Pumps for Europe program that would mobilize U.S. manufacturers under the Defense Production Act to send massive numbers of energy-efficient electric heat pumps to Europe and create a supply chain for America, too. National security experts say that if the world wasn't still so dependent on oil, Putin would have been much weaker and likely unable to wage war. Ironically, his war may end up accelerating the global shift away from fossil fuels.
So, there's something good.
And it all matters for climate, too. According to new data released by the International Energy Agency this week, the world's energy-related CO2 emissions reached an all-time high in 2021.
An all-time high?
Yes.
We are going in the wrong direction. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said in the opening, you look at the reality of the headlines, and, bread lines back in Russia, which again, I haven't seen since I was a kid, growing up in the 70s and in the 80s when there was the propaganda coming out of there. And I got to wonder, how bad things are, how much the Russian people will tolerate. And maybe how this ends, and for me, that's the important part of this. The bloodshed we're seeing, the devastation we're seeing, this is horrible. And the international community, I'm so impressed at the Biden administration for being able to pull everybody together as quickly as they've reacted, and to not let this fester for a huge amount of time. I think Biden has done an incredible job of pulling the globe together. But I wanted to get some background, some history, some try to get some understanding of where things are. And here to share some background and some thought on maybe a little Russian history, a little bit of maybe some thinking of what Putin was thinking. I've asked Mike Hickey to come talk with us. He's a professor of Russian history at Bloomsburg University. Mike, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much, Rick. And I want to echo what you said about the Biden administration providing leadership. If you consider also just how much damage was done to the international community and to American leadership of the international community by the previous administration, it's really remarkable how they've been able to pull things together here. So. It
really absolutely is. But here's the thing, and I look at this, and there's a lot of people scratching their head going, why did Putin do this? Why did he do it now? I don't know that there was any real chance of Ukraine getting into the UN. I know there was an application back in 2008. There's been talk numerous times. Why now doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, especially because the risk reward just I don't know was there. Can you give some background?
Yeah. I think, the why now, one of the arguments that you're hearing is, it's because Putin perceived Biden in the United States as weak, so he took advantage of that. I think that's pretty close to nonsense. I think there are other sort of things going on that affect the timing, including a sense that if we don't do this, the opportunity may be lost, right? So it goes back to the whole larger question of what Putin and his inner circle are thinking about this. And I want to kind of echo something you said right away, even before this started. One of the reasons I thought that they wouldn't invade is I don't see an end strategy. I don't see I don't see an exit from this. And I don't understand how they're going to, not how they're going to achieve the goals of military victory. They may very well do that. But how do you occupy and control Ukraine given the kind of resistance that they're going to face?
Yeah.
So what's shaping this thinking, what's shaping this decision? And I really think that to understand that, you have to look at how Putin and his inner circle understand the nature of Ukraine, which is to say they do not believe there is such a thing as a Ukrainian nation. They believe that Ukraine is an artificial creation of the Soviet period, that for political reasons that Lenin, Stalin, Khrushchev contributed to the establishment of, in a series of steps of a territory and a state where there should not have been a separate territory and state. So the argument for this, the belief, goes back to the way that they understand actually Russian history 1,000 years ago, right? So bear with me here for a second. Okay. in the 800s to the 1200s, the lands that are Ukraine and little bits of southern Russia were part of a kind of a federation of principalities, of princedoms, that was centered on Kiev, what the Russians call Kiev, and the Grand Prince of Kiev.
Okay.
And this was the sort of the most coherent state in the lands that eventually became the Russian Empire. It's referred to as Kievan Rus, as the Rus state. The Rus were the ruling class, actually, of Norse or Viking invaders who established control over this state. Became the sort of intermarried, mixed in, and the princes over this territory. Okay, so here's the thing: the Kievan Rus state collapsed in the 1200s. It started to decay even before the Mongol invasion, the descendants of Genghis Khan leading invasion that occupied the lands that became the Russian Empire from Central Asia across. Even before that, the Kievan state was in decay, was fragmenting. Okay? In the 1300s and the 1400s, part of the Kievan state were incorporated into Poland and Lithuania, which was a great power in the Middle Ages. Poland and Lithuania was a great power. Okay, so Western Ukraine was pretty much until World War II, until almost World War II, Western Ukraine was part of the Polish-Lithuanian sphere. The central and eastern parts of what is now Ukraine were for centuries under the rule of the Crimean Tatarate and other political entities, not the emerging Muscovite state that would eventually become Russia. It's not until the 1600s and the 1700s that the territories of what are Ukraine start to come under the control of the new emerging, kingdom, autocratic kingdom in Moscow. But in Russian nationalist historical imagination, that territory has always been part of Russia because they imagine, and this isn't just Putin and it's not just now, this goes back to pre-communist, pre-Soviet Russian nationalist historical imagination. They imagine that early medieval Kievan Rus was the ancestor, the father of the Russian state. So for Putin and his circle, Kiev and Ukraine are not only part of Russia, but they are part of the ancient Russia that converted to Christianity, that became the first Russian state. The whole story of Russian history for them is linked to the history of this territory, and they don't see it as a separate history, as a separate people, as a separate culture from Russian history. So when Putin says things like there is no such thing as a Ukrainian nation, they're just simply Russians who speak a different dialect. Their culture, their history, their existence is tied to ours, and we are never going to let them go. That's rooted in a really deep sense of his understanding of history. Now, you had kind of asked the question, what does Putin want to do? Is he trying to restore the Soviet Union, the old Soviet bloc? In a sense, he's more interested in restoring what he sees as Russia and the great Russian sphere of influence, the sort of the imperial realm of Russia. Putin has said many times, in many speeches and many articles, that the greatest disaster of modern history was the collapse of the Soviet Union, not because of his attachment to communism, but because it meant the dismemberment of the territory that he sees as the Russian sphere of influence,
and this is
territory that is historically Russian.
Right, and this is why, my view of this is, sure, it's going to be a part of Ukraine now, Crimea first, and then the couple of places that he wants to be independent states, and then it's going to be the rest of Ukraine, and then what next? This is, this to me only the beginning. So what you're saying is only confirming what I believe long term of this is only the beginning of where this takes us down the road.
Yeah, the what next is Belarusia, but that's been in the works for a long time. For several years now, there have been steps towards the closer integration of white Russia, of Belarusia, into the Russian Federation. Lukashenko, the dictator in Belarusia, is essentially at this point a puppet of Putin anyway, and so it's pretty clear that there's going to be the sort of incorporation of Belarusia and of territories in Ukraine, and then maybe the demilitarized puppet state that he wants to set up in the rest of Ukraine might not be incorporated directly into Russia, but will be within the Russian sphere and will have no independent existence. I don't have any sense that he views the Baltic states, that he views Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia at this point, or Poland, as targets for reintegration into Russia, though he certainly found their movement into NATO to be a threat to Russia. And that's, something he has said repeatedly, right? The whole idea that of moving now, it has been justified. There's some bizarre stuff, like the idea that the Ukrainian government are Nazis, et cetera. We'll come back to that. But by the point that this is Russian territory, and if they join NATO, then what you're essentially doing is putting NATO troops and NATO weapons in Russian territory. It's a knife at our throat. We're never going to allow it. Right? But he hasn't used that kind of rhetoric towards Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Poland. That doesn't mean he never will.
No, that's where I've been for a while. My view is he wants to get the gang back together.
But a couple days before the invasion, there was a new bilateral treaty signed with Azerbaijan, where he's exploiting the conflict that he has helped to nurture, and that the Russian government has helped to nurture between Georgia and Azerbaijan. Old violence that goes back to to before Putin was in power, but he's been exploiting that in order to try to bring Azerbaijan back into the Russian sphere more neatly. It's unclear whether Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan are really going to see an interest in alignment with Russia or alignment with China. That's sort of unclear, but he, if nothing else, because he sees Ukraine as Slavic territory, as Christian territory, and his understanding of Russian history and religion are really a big part of this, right? We can come back to that later, which is part of the point of contact between his people and people like Steve Bannon, et cetera. It's this sort of religious concept. That Ukraine has a different status, and Belarusia have a different status in this thinking than other parts of the former empire, because they are Slavic, because they are Orthodox, Russian Orthodox. So at the moment, I'm not too worried about further expansion. I'm more worried about what the impact, because I don't see an exit strategy. Yeah. Right. So,
and you see it getting much worse, obviously. I mean, so if he's this vested in it, Mike, if he's this vested in it, there's no backing up, and there's no depth of depravity. This is potentially, could he drop a nuke here? I mean, could this be the ultimate in abuser kind of mentality? If I can't have you, nobody can. Fiona Hill, former State Department official who's written a major biography of Putin, has said in a lot of interviews in the last 2 weeks, don't put it past them, right? Don't think it's ruled out. The use of at least some kind of strategic, small scale rather, nuclear weapon. It's clear that part of the potential scenario is some kind of act potentially against a nuclear power facility, and then as a false flag operation, blaming it on the Ukrainians. They're already setting that up with this nonsense about U.S. bacteriological labs and a lot of the other sort of nonsense. Yeah, the propaganda machine they've got is fantastic. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Mike Hickey. Mike's a professor of Russian history at Bloomsburg University. We'd like to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Now, Mike, we keep hearing all of these justifications that are being thrown out there. Obviously the history part of it. I've heard that the gay parades are part of it. I've heard a bunch of justifications. And they seem to be changing more often than not. I kind of think that you're probably right. They view this as part of their birthright, part of their history, and part of my fear is that this is something they're not going to back up from, and that there's only one way to go back from this. So I look at the people that are standing in bread lines. What's the appetite for this kind of push towards that legacy within the population, do you think?
Well, and we should come back to a couple of things that you mentioned about the thinking of the people around Putin and how it relates to things like gay parades, et cetera, because that's really important to understanding both their rhetoric and their motivations. But as far as the response of the Russian population to this, it's varied. I have acquaintances, friends of friends who have been arrested in anti-war demonstrations, who have been beaten by police, who have had their arms broken. There have been sweeps. Thousands and thousands of people have been arrested. Last year, in response to demonstrations and protests against Putin's government, the government cracked down on the most coherent opposition network, Alexei Navalny's political network, and really decapitated that. So what's been happening is anti-war expression has had to sort of organize quickly, spontaneously, without a real leadership structure. People do this through social media messaging and through text messaging. It's intercepted by the government, and within 10 to 20 minutes, once people start to gather, the police are there, the SWAT teams are there, and people are getting
crushed,
vacuumed up, right? Yeah. There have been petitions from all kinds of different elements in Russian society, from scientists, from history professors, from students opposing the war. People have been fired from their jobs. Broadcasters who have dared to use the wrong language have been fired from their jobs. It is now punishable by up to 15 years of hard labor to refer to what's happening in Ukraine as a war. It must be called a special military operation. A friend of mine in Russia sent me a message the other day, which was a kind of a meme with a picture of Tolstoy's novel War and Peace, except the title was changed to Special Military Operation and Peace, as a way of obscuring this. That in itself was a brave thing for him to do.
Yes.
Because, right? So, there is opposition, but the opposition tends to be around young people who are used to contact with the rest of the world, who are used to multiple sources of information besides Russian television, Russian radio, Russian newspaper media, which is largely controlled, almost completely, well, now completely controlled, was largely controlled, now completely controlled by the government. So the folks who are diehard falling for this are people, my age, right? Who grew up in the Soviet period, who have something vested in that idea of Russia as great power and us as a player in the world, and we've been humiliated by the West, because that's a lot of this too. It's a reaction to humiliation.
Yeah, because
right?
the messaging that I've gotten out of this is Russia's nothing but a glorified gas station with a gangster leader and a bunch of oligarchs who have they've got giant boats that they flaunt their wealth around the world. But you've still got people starving in the country where all of the wealth's been robbed out of. How accurate is that assessment? Well,
the standard of living in general improved tremendously in the 2000s, which is one of the reasons that Putin is so popular. And I spent a lot of time there in the 1990s and in the first decade of the 2000s. I haven't spent as much time in the last 6 or 7 years. Well, certainly not since COVID, but in the couple years before that because of family stuff, et cetera. But I was there in the 1990s when the economy collapsed. And you know, I saw World War II veterans selling their medals for bravery, et cetera, at markets in order to get enough money in order to buy cat food to eat. You know, things were terrible in the 1990s. There were ups and downs, but for the most part, life was hard there. And if you go to a place like Moscow now, if you had been there in the 80s and the 90s, especially like, you know, I started going there in the 80s, it's unrecognizable. There are skyscrapers. It's a, you know, there are luxury stores. There's a lot of money in a couple of places.
Right.
I work in the provinces. I'm a historian of rural areas. You get out into the rural areas, and there are some pockets of prosperity, but it's still, for the most part, when you get out of the cities. And by the way, cities, you know, the one thing that the communist regime did was urbanize the country. Russia is far more urbanized in terms of its population than we are, right? It is a country of mega cities, right? So once you get out of those mega cities and once you get out of the major population centers, yeah, there's hardship and poverty, but there had been enough economic growth and enough prosperity in the 2000s, in the first 2 decades of this century, to really underline the sense that, okay, amongst people who are Putin supporters, that the government has been keeping corruption under control. Because, I mean, you say kleptocrats. Yeah, the people who run this country are crooks. But I'll tell you, in the 1990s, I knew people who were killed by the mafia. Yeah. I knew people who were shot down on the street, business owners.
They were real crooks, absolutely.
Right. So those people then rose into, the head crooks, rose into positions of power, and they put controls over the other crooks and stop that level of violence. So what a lot of people see is that things are more stable, things are more orderly, things are more prosperous, and, you know, glory be to the government of Putin. I don't know that there are bread lines now. What I do know is that the value of the ruble has crashed, that the buying power of Russian currency has disappeared, that the ability of people to buy foreign goods has dried up, and the Russian middle class, which had become used to consumption and lived in a way very similar to the American middle class, is finding that now it is facing a prospect of real economic hardship like they haven't seen since the 1990s.
Yeah.
Your question is, will people respond to that by protesting against the government? What the government is trying to do is to say, first of all, this is an opportunity. We're going to become stronger within ourselves. It's you know, the make Russia great again kind of rhetoric. You know, we'll seal ourselves off from the rest of the world and build. But the other thing is the government is saying, look, the hardship you're feeling because of this and that you're going to feel is because of the aggression of the West.
Right. No, that's quite obvious. Absolutely. That's
right. So that will convince a certain part of the population. Whether those folks who are, you know, used to using their iPhones in order to order things from Amazon so they get stuff from Czechoslovakia sent to their front door are going to fall for that is another question.
Yeah.
But if they don't, what do? And this is where the control over the media, the police, et cetera, is so important. Yeah. And the idea, you know, the sort of nutso Lindsey Graham, that somebody kill this guy, that's not going to change anything because you have this whole power structure that thinks the same way, that has the same interests, the same concerns.
And so, this is where we're going to have to end it. We'll see where this takes us. But Michael, I appreciate the time, the input. I'd love to have you back again real soon. Great stuff, man.
Okay, thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Mike Hickey, professor of Russian history there at Bloomsburg University. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1968. That was the day that farm labor activist Cesar Chavez broke a 25-day fast. He fasted as a sign of commitment to nonviolence during the struggle for farm workers in Delano, California, to gain fair wages and safe working conditions. During the fast, he only drank water. He broke the fast with a ceremonial mass in Delano. Presidential candidate Robert Kennedy was in attendance. At the mass, Chavez was too weak to give a speech, so he gave his written words to Reverend James Drake to share with those in attendance. He wrote, "We are gathered here today not so much to observe the end of the fast, but because we are a family bound together in common struggle for justice. We are a union family celebrating our unity and the nonviolent nature of our movement. The fast has had different meanings for different people. Some of you may still wonder about its meaning and importance. It was not intended as a pressure against any growers. For that reason, we have suspended negotiations and arbitration proceedings and relaxed the militant picketing and boycotting of the strike during this period. I undertook the fast because my heart was filled with grief and pain for the suffering of the farm workers. The fast was first for me and then for all of us in this union. It was a fast for nonviolence and a call for sacrifice." Chavez engaged in 2 more long fasts during his life as an activist. He fasted in 1972 for 24 days. And in 1988, at the age of 61, he fasted for 36 days to highlight the harmful effects of pesticides on farm workers and their children. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Last July, several GOP senators combined their 5-watt intellects to charge that inflation was rising because of, quote, insane tax and spending spree of President Biden and the Democrats. Never mind that the insane spending is for such sensible, productive, and enormously popular national needs as child care and jobless benefits. Mitch McConnell's rabidly partisan flock saw the chance to politicize the public's legitimate worries about rising prices. You poor consumers are made to pay more for basics, they squawked, because of Socialist Joe's investment in grassroots people. Follow the ricocheting pinball of the GOP's logic. 1, they say that helping hard-hit families induces them to refuse to go to work. 2, this creates blockages in the global supply chain. 3, this causes shortages of everything. 4, this forces corporate bosses to raise all prices, which 5, slams the middle class and poor, so 6, lazy workers cause inflation. Whoa, Rube Goldberg couldn't have dreamed up a more fantastical diagram to deflect attention from what's really happening, namely that instead of an inflation problem, we have a corporate greed problem. Of course, the greedmeisters insist that their pursuit of excess corporate profits has not driven any price surges. In our economy of free market competition, they snap, prices are established by the law of supply and demand. It's the magic of the marketplace, they explain. But magicians don't do magic, they perform illusions. And the illusion of free market competition implodes when it hits the reality that our economy doesn't remotely resemble a competitive marketplace. This is Jim Hightower saying, for some 40 years, corporate-directed government policies have been transforming America into a monopoly nation, letting the few gouge the many. That's where inflation comes from.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So that slimy little pinhead from North Carolina, Madison Cawthorn, got caught on video calling Ukrainian President Zelensky a thug, saying, remember that Zelensky's a thug. Remember that the Ukrainian government's incredibly corrupt and is incredibly evil and has been pushing woke ideologies. And again, this is all Russian propaganda right here. That's basically what they were doing back when, you remember the former guy in the perfect phone call A lot of that, it's all corrupt there. And I'm waiting for the laptop to fall out of the sky again. But again, the woke ideologies, the gay parades. They're coming. I still like Sarah's idea of the gas that turns people into drag queens. I think that would be funny. Maybe he'd make a funny drag queen. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, maybe even this one. I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman Bob Ney, to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
So what do you make of this little snot?
With Cawthorn?
Yeah.
Well, you want to talk about his driving or his comment?
His driving's the best thing about the thing I respect most about him.
He's been charged with driving with a revoked license.
Twice.
Yeah. Well, yes. And so this is, in the point it was his third traffic offense in the last 6 months, and he was pulled over. What was it, last Thursday? And that was with the license. The third time, look, he's a congressman. You can get a driver. You can actually put the driver on the campaign account. You can actually, for certain cases, if it's federal government, put the driver on the federal account.
Yeah, he's going to have to now.
Well, I would say so. But so you think that's something? Then he makes the comment: "Who on earth makes a?" Well, he does. Who on earth makes a comment about Zelensky, being the thug when Putin is bombing hospitals and maternity clinics? It amazes me.
Well, a white supremacist, and look, I put Cawthorn in that white supremacist view.
Well,
I put him in that place where Putin's right there with his hey, we want to be like Putin. We want to be like that's our guy, man.
Well, how he survives these, and then I don't know how he'll do it. I can't imagine who can be popular taking the side of Putin over Zelensky at this point in time.
Yeah, I don't either, but we're in this weird spot where you just never know. What's going on in these crazy days. There's a lot of stuff going on that I'm just shaking my head over. The fact that there were 17 people who voted against banning Russian oil coming into the country. I'm going, what?
I read the comments from them. There were two Democrats and then 15 Republicans, and I was just trying to think in my mind because look, I was one of three people, and probably at some point in time somebody said, what's wrong with those three? I was one of three people who voted against the Patriot Act on the Republican side. I think the Democratic side had maybe 40-some. One of three people. And so I'm sure at some point in time somebody said, well, I know because I got constituents and I had hate mail. Of course, later on, it turned okay. But I explained why I did it. The fact that, they're going to be excessive with this. It's not going to help. And so I understand sometimes people make, controversial votes, but I'm thinking on this one, how do you justify not banning the imports from Russia? We have 61% of our oil. When you break it down, Canada, exports the oil. 3% is from Russia. Saudi Arabia, 6%. So actually, we could get 3% more from Saudi Arabia and then just call it even with Russia. So I just don't understand how you just say, okay, we're not going to do that.
I don't know how you make that stand, but you look. I don't get why Ilhan Omar decided this was the time to pick that fight, or Cori Bush. I don't get why those two Democrats decided that. But I do get why the 15 Republicans. I do get when you look at Cawthorn, you look at Boebert, you look at Green, Gosar, Gomart. They are normal regulars on the white supremacist route. They're the ones who show up at CPAC and America First PAC. They're the ones who grace the stages of these white supremacist rallies. So it's not a surprise to me that they're carrying the water for Vlad. Not surprising.
then also the comment was U.S. dependence on oil means a dependence on tyrants, so why vote for the tyrant to continue to sell oil? I didn't get that.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me. Now, the argument then is, if that's your argument, then, well, we need to drill, baby, drill here. So then, because I get this from my Republican friends, well, we need to be drilling more. And the truth of the matter is if that's the case, if we're not going to get oil from places like Saudi Arabia or Venezuela or places where we get it from, either we stop using so much oil or we figure out where to get it from here. And, the reality is there are leases out there that oil companies aren't drilling. So for me, this isn't so much a government problem as a corporate America problem.
Right. And also the fact that, we need to build refineries. It's not all about drilling.
Right.
We can drill, but if you don't have the refinery capacity, then you have a problem. So a lot of times, as I understand it, it has to be refined and then brought, for example, from Saudi Arabia. But I think in this case, as much as, I, like anybody, hate dependence on foreign oil, but if Russia's 3% of our total, which it is, and we have to look at why we have Russia. We have Russia because during the Trump years, we put a ban on Venezuelan oil, to try to change their habits, and then that's why we started to buy Russian oil.
It's amazing, how our allegiances change so we can get the juice. When, my view is we should have been moving to alternative fuels a while ago. We should be there by now. Granted, we're never getting completely off of oil, but you know what? Damn it, we should be moving further away. We should have more public transit. We should have more opportunities to not have to use so much oil. And yet all I keep hearing, Bob, is, if we'd have built the Keystone Pipeline, we'd have built the Keystone XL pipeline, we wouldn't have these problems, without actually understanding that none of that oil was staying here.
Well, also none of it could have been completed by now anyway.
Right. And the other part of it, to your point, the refinery capacity, we don't have the capacity to refine that dirty sludge oil that was being shipped overseas to be refined.
Right.
But hey, don't let reality get in the way of a good talking point.
Well, also there's a process here and a lesson to be learned. What do we now acknowledge about our supply chain? I mean, you don't hear the people, let's do another free trade bill because we need more jobs. You don't hear that anymore, Thank goodness. But we learned about our supply chain. So what are we doing now? Microchip, the Microchip Center in Ohio, and a lot of talk about other, different facilities to be built. We have realized this is a supply chain problem. Can we correct the supply chain problem today? No. Are we working to correct it for the future? Yes, we are. We're not going to change it today, but we're working. Well, it's comparable, Rick, the same to oil. Yes, we have a problem. We want to help the Ukraine. It's going to, eliminate 3% of the Russian oil, so we have to make up 3% somewhere. It could be made up 1% Canada, 1% Saudi Arabia, 1% Mexico. We can do that. That doesn't mean that you say, well, we don't want to look at the future. You can start to look at the future now on alternative methods. So there's no reason we can't compare this to the supply chain issue. We're not ending the supply chain problem overnight, but we're working on the long-term effects of ending it. Same thing with oil. We can do that.
No, exactly. Yeah, but again, you can't have those conversations when people go, it's all Joe Biden's fault.
It's all about this. It's all about the Keystone Pipeline, which, wouldn't, again, if it had went, into full-blown construction, it wouldn't be doing anything for us.
Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Bob Ney, former Ohio Congressman, political analyst. If you got a thought, question, comment, love to hear it. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Also email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Never miss a second. We just the House passed a $1.5 trillion omnibus bill. I did find it interesting that Lauren Boebert, who clearly does not understand the assignment, went on and railed on the fact that she didn't get to read it overnight that she just thought it was dropped in the middle of the night without actually understanding how the whole process works. You would think after, as long as she's been there, someone may have, gotten her a pop-up book or something to explain how the process works.
Right, exactly. Plus, there are, analysts for this, both sides of the aisle, staffers who pour through, particularly everything. And this one's nothing new. They have been throwing around. Look, this is a temporary kick it down the road anyway. And the whole process of this, it's an omnibus bill. It takes a 4-day stopgap measure extending the current funding. It's also taking, and yes, there's some additions there which the staff knows about, but it is also taking the current funding process and adding to it in certain places domestic spending and defense, because this is what they do, and they split it into two parts. So therefore, on the Democratic side, they would have the opportunity for those who wanted to, not all of the Democrats, but they would have the opportunity to vote against, quote, sort of the defense spending portion of it, and the Republicans who didn't want to, have anything to do with any domestic spending could then vote against the other portion. So there were two chances for a vote, and she knew that. She knows that's the process. This is nothing secret. Both parties agreed to do it this way, and so you're taking what we funded, kicking the can down the road a little bit. They've been doing this for about 12 years anyway, and then you produce a bill. And there are some extra things in it, which again, Rosa DeLauro, who was chair of the committee, puts out a list, and it goes to the members, and it tells you in there what are any particular new changes.
So if I get you Lauren Boebert's number, can you walk her through this?
You hate me? Do you hate me that much? Well, let's see. How much does the job pay? Let me ask you that. It better be good.
Look, someone, at some point you got to go. Well, I guess it took her a long time to get the GED. There's got to be a way to help catch her up to speed. By the time she gets it, hopefully she'll get voted out. So yeah, never mind. Because she's not going to vote for it anyway. And look, right. Even I think here's what my problem is. Even if she did understand it, which I truly believe she does not, and I know that sounds like a cheap shot, but I really don't think she has the capacity to understand what's going on. She'd be against it anyway.
She should realize something. In these days in Congress, where they can't agree which direction the bathroom's in, look, they had a 260 to 171 vote. So that in itself would tell her, okay. Maybe this is, some items that were agreed to.
Yeah, it's incredible. What do you think of, Marjorie Taylor Greene, her not getting a salary for a whole year?
Due to the fines, you mean?
Yeah, she basically pissed her whole salary away by not wearing a mask.
She must have money to burn.
And you know what? I still think that paying her $0 is still too much.
I still like your idea. Keep her on the committees.
No. Look, I'm a firm believer of if someone wants to do themselves in, let them. Don't give. Democrats made a huge mistake taking her off the committees. I take flack from that, but I still believe it. Don't do other people's dirty work for them.
Right. And we talked about that, that they shouldn't do that. Don't get into that. Let each party take care of its own, unless they, of course, do something that's obviously complete threatening or, a crime or something. But I guess she must have some money. Yeah, she's got some money. And look, the reality is she's a reality star. Because we've turned Congress into, Real Housewives of Congress or, the reality Congress or whatever it is. And I'm sure she's getting, something somewhere that way. Plus, I guess she was fairly well-to-do from, I guess, her husband or something. Taylor Commercial Construction Company. Yeah. She purchased $50,000 worth of President Trump's social media venture, the digital world. Yeah, and I hope she loses every $50,000 worth of shares.
I hope she loses every
penny.
She's
only going to lose her salary for the match. She's going to lose her $50,000.
I hope she loses.
Venture.
I hope she loses every penny of it, and I'm still counting down the days until Devin Nunes issues the press release that he's suing Trump for non-payment of services.
And then there's the Trump press release that Nunes always was bad. He always knew that, He was always a bad guy.
Exactly. Lastly, I wanted to get your thoughts on the executive order on the Bitcoin, on the cryptocurrency. I personally am opposed to the idea of governmental cryptocurrency. I do not like the idea of state-sponsored surveillance of our money and that kind of control. I'm a little weird about that, but I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, I'm weird about Bitcoin, period. And, different governments have, China, for example, started to clamp down on it. And I understand that the president's executive order is, exploring the options. To me, and when I read it, I don't like the idea of the United States government eventually using Bitcoin as a economic medium for us. I don't like it at all.
Nope.
I don't understand Bitcoin. I don't pretend to. I think it's dangerous. I just think that the United States government is not doing the best job in using actual green currency cash. Let's try to stick to correcting that versus something that really kind of doesn't exist in my mind, at least. Maybe,
yeah.
But I'm old, so maybe I don't understand technology.
No, I'm old too. I mean, I still want something in my pocket, but I also don't want someone looking over my shoulder every time I use it.
Sure.
Now they tell me no one can trace it. It's untraceable. It's unfindable. I got to tell you, I think if it's a government issued currency, someone's going to be able to figure out how to surveil that.
They'll find it.
Just my thought.
Exactly.
And look, I think all of these different cryptocurrencies that are going around, I think it's like any scheme. It's going to grow until it doesn't.
Well, I had friends that, hey, you got to get into the Bitcoin. Of course, they're calling me now saying, do you have any work in your flips?
Yeah.
We lost all our money in Bitcoin. I told them it's a playground for the rich.
Yeah. No. Look,
playground for the rich.
If you got extra money, why not go play? But if this is your life savings, I don't know, not for me. Just my thoughts. But Bob, as always, appreciate the time, man.
Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman. Seriously, I'm not a big fan of the idea of going to a digital currency for a whole bunch of reasons. Mostly because I don't want that kind of traceability. I don't want that kind of oversight. Just my thoughts. Love to hear yours, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you've got any questions, comments, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Quick break, right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1925. That was the day the first civil lawsuit for damages was filed on behalf of the Radium Girls. During the 1910s and 20s, radium was all the rage. It was considered a medical cure-all for everything from blindness to asthma. The U.S. Radium Corporation employed hundreds of young women in New Jersey and Illinois to paint radium onto watch dials and military instruments. Women workers were instructed to shape the paintbrushes to a fine point with their lips in order to paint the numbers onto the watch faces. They soon fell ill. Many complained of losing scores of teeth and shattered and rotting jaws. The death toll began to rise. U.S. Radium and other related companies initially tried to smear the women as suffering from syphilis. Catherine Wiley of the New Jersey Consumers League began investigating the use of radium by dial painters. She was also concerned about how emissions affected the community surrounding the plant. Wiley enlisted the help of Alice Hamilton, mother of industrial medicine and occupational toxicology. The chief medical examiner of Essex County determined the women suffered from radium exposure. They were exhaling radon gas. The findings were earth-shattering for the industry. Case proceedings were highly publicized in the press. Extremely frail and sick young women appeared in court, barely able to walk or testify. The company agreed to settle the case. $10,000 for each woman, a $400 a year pension, and medical care. Women at the Ottawa plant suffered for years before finally learning the truth about their job-related illnesses. The case impacted fields related to occupational safety and health. It also fundamentally broadened scientific understanding of radioactive elements. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Got an email from Brian saying, I never thought of the fact that none of the mega churches are doing anything to raise money for Ukraine. I wonder why that is. They are actually raising money for themselves. They're raising tons of money to feed the greedy, wealthy people on the stages. I look at this and yeah, they do. They're there for themselves. They do feed themselves quite well. They got to have their multi-million-dollar jets and their arenas full of givers. But you haven't heard much, have you? And the weird thing is, and we didn't get into this earlier with Professor Hickey, that the religion thing that Putin's pushing, that hyper Christianity, that's playing in the mega churches because they want to do that kind of stuff here. They want that kind of purity, which is why in places like Florida, places like Texas, you're seeing the kind of legislation that Putin would be very proud of. He would put his seal approval on. And this is where honest, decent people have to step forward and speak out. It may not be your issue. Gay marriage has never been my issue. The LGBTQ community has never been my issue. Abortion has never been my issue. But the sad reality is the idea of an injury to one being an injury to all. I understand that if they are harmed, if they don't have the ability to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of their happiness, eventually the rest of us are going to be next. And this is where it is for me. Look, you live your life and you should have the right to pursue your happiness outside of government intrusion. As long as your rights don't infringe on my rights, we're okay. And, two people getting married and being happy have nothing to do with anybody else but themselves. If in some place that is bugging someone else, that's their problem. And we live in a place that is really just right now with a bunch of busybodies who evidently don't have enough to do. And I look at Florida, I look at Texas. These are scary places. The policies that they're pushing, the division, the hatred, the anger, all in the name of religiosity, all in the name of some hyper-Christianity, some Putin-esque Christianity, because we don't want to have gay pride parades, is nonsense. You're going to justify bombing a children's hospital. Remember, these are the pro-life people. We love the children. Going to justify bombing a children's hospital because because they're gay pride, they're woke ideology, to use Madison Cawthorn's words. It's okay. We bomb Ukraine because they have a woke ideology. And you know what that is? That's dog whistle. That's to get his minions and his followers to think, well, it's all that woke stuff. It's that Black Lives Matter. It's that gay stuff. We don't care about that. But I'm telling you, an injury to one is an injury to all. And we in the working class, we better start thinking that way again. We better start thinking about each other again, standing together once again in solidarity. Because you know what? Today it's them or that person. But before you know it, it's going to be you. It's going to be me. It's going to be your children. That's why you stand up now, so it doesn't get that far. That's my thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com is where you get the podcast. Make sure you take the program wherever you go. Share it with your friends, neighbors, friends, and all of that. Subscribe, like, share, all of it. Thanks for being here. See you next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show.